We'll be beginning with the first session, the Dr. D.V. Datta Memorial Oration. May I take the honor to invite our chairpersons, Dr. R.K. Dhiman and Dr. Ajay Duseja, biomarkers in alcohol-related liver disease, from clinics to omics.
Good morning, everyone. So, I would like to tell about Professor D.V. Datta, Dr. Dharamveer Datta, in whose memory this oration has been instituted, was born on 31st May 1934. He graduated in medicine from the GR Medical College, Gwalior, Madhya Pradesh in April 1958. He obtained his doctorate in medicine from Vikram University in 1961. He then went to England, where he worked as an assistant lecturer in medicine at the Royal Free Hospital, the School of Medicine, UK, and pursued research at the University of London. He was awarded the degree of Doctor of Philosophy of that university in 1964. He then went to the United States and worked as a research fellow at Harvard Medical School. He was selected as an assistant professor of experimental medicine at PGIMER Chandigarh and joined the institute on 22nd February 1967. In April 1969, he was selected as assistant professor of medicine at the institute. He was appointed as associate professor of hepatic disease in 1971. He was the founder head of the Department of the Hepatology at PGI, and his work at the department received national and international recognition. Within a short period of his joining the institute, Dr. Datta earned a name of himself as an eminent hepatologist, an excellent research worker, and devoted physician. With his qualities of the head and heart, he endeared himself to the students and the colleagues. Unfortunately, he was snatched away from us by the cruel hands of death on 13th of the May 1981 at a very young age of 47 years only. In Dr. Datta's death, the institute lost a medical scientist who had already made a mark in this specialty at the national and international level. Dr. Datta is survived by his wife and two sons. Dr. Mrs. Usha Datta was the head of the Department of Immunopathology at PGI Chandigarh. One of his sons, Dr. Rakesh Datta, is a major in the army and has specialized in ENT. The other son, Mr. Deepak Datta, who is present here along with his wife and the daughter, is an engineer and works for the US based company and presently is staying in Chandigarh. To perpetuate Dr. Datta's memory, Indian National Association of the Study of the Liver, that is INASL, decided to institute an oration and invite an outstanding scientist to deliver oration on the subject pertaining to the field of the hepatology. I'll just name few. Those who have received this oration: Professor Sheila Sherlock from the Royal Free Hospital, Professor Roger Williams from King's College Hospital, Professor Blandis from University of Toronto, Professor B.N. Tandar, AIMS Delhi, Professor Kunio Okuda, Professor Didler Lebrek, Dr. Jas Mohan Bajaj, Jober Yonesi, Shiv Kumar Shareen, many more, and for this prestigious oration that is instituted by the INASL. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. So it's a proud moment for me to, announce and provide you the biography of the orator for today for the Dr. D.V. Datta Memorial Oration, and he's none other than Professor Alexander Cragg. So Professor Alexander Cragg is is the chair of the Department of Gastroenterology and Hepatology at Odense University Hospital, and also the director of Flash Center for Liver Research and chair of Health Sciences at Danish Institute of Advanced Study at the University of Southern Denmark. Since 2021, he has provided exceptional leadership within the European Association for the Study of the Liver, INASL, initially as vice secretary, and then since 2023, you took over as the secretary general, and now you're immediate past secretary general of INASL. He's had his various degrees, but his MD was from University of Copenhagen, 2001, PhD again 2008. But really, what I like is also the executive has an executive MBA degree again from the Copenhagen Business School. He has various other, degrees and awards. But what, in short, I would like to tell you is that Professor Cragg is an internationally renowned hepatologist whose groundbreaking scientific contributions are matched by his visionary leadership in global liver health. His career is distinguished by a unique combination of innovative research, clinical advancement, impactful education, and influential policy advocacy. With close to around 500 publications, Professor Cragg has profoundly shaped the current knowledge in hepatology, particularly in steatotic liver disease, liver fibrosis, cirrhosis, and the innovative use of biomarkers, integrating biomarkers, omics technology, and artificial intelligence. He has consistently led major international research initiatives, exemplifying his dedication to scientific advancement. As director of the FLASH Liver Research Center, coordinator of the EU funded Galaxy project, and principal investigator in numerous prestigious consortia, including MicroPredict, LiverScreen, LiverAim, Professor Cragg's leadership has consistently delivered transformative outcomes for liver health, research, and clinical practice. Beyond academia, Professor Cragg is an influential advocate for liver health, passionately translating scientific insights into impactful public health policies. Central to Professor Cragg's advocacy is the strategic position of liver diseases within the global non-communicable or NCD agenda. His commitment was exemplified through his leadership in converting high-level side meetings in 23 and 24, one of which I happened to attend in Geneva, on the sidelines of World Health Assembly in Geneva, and aimed at gaining formal recognition of critical liver diseases, including MASLD, MASH, and alcohol-related liver disease as priority in NCDs. Professor Cragg represents the ideal modern physician, scientist, and leader, breaking conventional boundaries to advance liver health from bench research through critical care to global health policy. His profound influence through pioneering new therapies, educating future hepatologists worldwide, and collaborating closely with international organizations like WHO continues to elevate global awareness, reduce stigma, and tangibly improve patient outcomes globally. Through his visionary leadership, Professor Craggs is accelerating scientific discovery and ensuring his translation into meaningful and real-world impacts. I also have to thank him for, the close association we have had for last, few years with INASL. Thank you very much. And the topic for today's oration by Dr. Cragg is biomarkers in alcohol-related liver disease from clinics to omics. So, Professor Cragg, let's welcome you on the stage for the prestigious Professor Dr. D.V. Datta Memorial Oration. Dr.
Thank you very much, AJs, for these very touching words, and I think a big, heartfelt, humble thank you to INASL for this big honor. It really means a big things to me. And now I'm also just had a chance to talk with D.V. Datta's son and his granddaughter studying medicine. I'm sure we will have a soon another Datta entering the long line of superstars in hepatology from Chandigarh. So thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit of something that has been of my interest, where I think there's an unmet need about alcohol-related liver disease, but particularly also about biomarkers. Biomarkers are the things we use to take decisions on behalf of patients on better informed basis. So these are my conflicts. So we always start with, why do we need this? What is the challenge? Well, there's specifically something to look into here. And now also talking to many of my old, but also getting more and more friends from India, that it's basically, I think, a bit hidden problem in India also. I don't expect that this is what we see in this study, where the odds ratio of being seen at advanced states, where there's little opportunities, often beyond transplant, for alcohol relatively, let's just say to MASLDs, maybe 14 times higher. That means that these patients we give a significantly poor opportunities for making it. So there we can do something as researchers, and I think that's a privilege for people like us in academia. We can actually make a difference if we have the long side. Then the second question is, what is needed and whose perspective matters? I think there are two perspectives. The most important perspective is this guy. This is one of my patients called Henry. Unfortunately, he died. He was diagnosed too late, but he learned me a lot. And he learned me always start with individual perspective. And that's also the test I self do very often when we have projects or people ask me, should we do this, that research? And I say, why? And they call all kinds of strange reasons. Say, no, these are not relevant. Okay, what does this project matter for Henry? Because if it matters for Henry, we can get money for it and we can publish, because then it matters for others. Henry has simple questions, and we meet them every day in our clinic. He wants to know, am I sick, yes or no? How bad is it? Will I die or not? You would probably ask the same questions if you suddenly had a condition you worry about. And he will also ask, is there any treatment? Will I benefit by treatment? And if you give me a drug, how likely is it work? That's the kind of things I think goes on in many patients' head. All these things are qualified by biomarkers. I'll come back to how difficult it actually is with the biomarkers, and understand the playing field and framework there is challenging. So then the second thing is, we are second, that's the doctors. What do we need to know to help guide better decisions on behalf of our patients? So we're interested actually in how many does the biomarker correctly classify? That's the true positive, the true negative. If anybody of you can explain me in less than a minute what an Auroch curve means, please stand up. Problem is, we talk it all the time, we use it all the time. Most people, unfortunately, find it difficult to understand and comprehend. It makes a big difference how this curve moves or not. And sensitivity and specificity, yes, characteristics of biomarker, but not really useful on an individual clinic basis. I'll use it a bit, but with this in notion, and tell you something about it. And then there's, of course, the false positives, false negatives. That's another issue. But now we're patient-centric. It's the other thing we will look into. This slide is maybe my busiest slides, but I think it's very important, because I'll likely say something, show you some data, would say, no, this guy is crazy. And that's probably correct, but it doesn't mean it's wrong what I say. So it's about understanding the biomarkers and see where they are positioned. So we first look to the left here. I don't have a point. I don't know if it comes up. It does. The most important questions from a biomarker index is the context of use. And that means, where are you going to use the biomarker? At population or in your outpatient clinic? Because there's a big difference in the prevalence of the population. Come back to why. But here's the distribution of the patients. As you can see in the curves, there is the very low pre-test probability, as we call it, or it's very high. You know, if it's very high, it's easy to fish. If you're fishing in a dam full of fish, easy. If you're fishing in the ocean with very little fish, it's difficult to catch them. The next question you need to ask yourself, what do you want to use the biomarker for? And that's all the question that Henry had to me. So let's move forward, because this is our playing field here, what we use to tease each other, to convince about this or that in the publication. And this is the characteristics. All these curves, they look confusing, but it's exactly the same curve, exactly the same biomarker. The only thing that is changed is the prevalence of the disease. So let's just start with the top one and compare with the lower one. So if we apply a biomarker in a low prevalence setting, look here. Let's get the pointer up. Low prevalence of the disease. That means that the pre-probability is low. It's very easy to have a biomarker with a high negative predictive value because already 97% of the patients don't have a disease. So coming out and say, whoa, I have a 98% negative predictive value of a biomarker, mean almost nothing. It's probably a pretty poor biomarker. So you have a negative predictive value of 98%, a positive predictive one for 38%. So that's not very good at diagnosis. I'm coming back to that when I tell you a little bit about FIB4 and TE, which we come to love, but also need to criticize. If we go to the other end of the spectrum, that's in hospital. Yes, pretest probability in my outpatient clinic is, let's say, just like this one, 60%. Okay, very easy to have a positive predictive value of 90%, something like that. I hope you accept this framework and try to revisit that when you understand, as I move forward, but also when you look into biomarker papers. Then let's go back to the patients, to early diagnosis, to alcohol. So we wanted to improve this early diagnosis. How do we do that? This is just one example. I think all guidelines, more or less over the world, say the same. FIB4 is the magic bullet. Losing should be the index test, and the second one should be transient elastography. And that's good. FIB4 was originally developed for HIV and HCV co-infection in outpatient clinic settings. So it was actually not built for that purpose, and that comes with some challenges. This is a study where we applied FIB4 in the liver screen consortium here with around 5,000 patients with low prevalence. So let's see if we apply this 1.3 cutoff. That's this one. And then we use transient elastography sort of as the control marker. So that means that all these patients up here, they don't have liver disease. They're false positives. Patients, we say you might have a disease, but they have nothing. That's 50% of the population. The other thing which is also very bad is that if you then look to the lower right here, that's the false negative. That's those actually have a high FibroScan, but a low FIB4. That's another 50%. You lose there. That's a 50% of those with a disease you miss with applying that. So that's a big issue, that half of the patients, if you apply FIB4, is false negative. Then argument is always, let's raise the bar. What happens then? Yeah, the false positive decrease, but the false negative is massively increases. So then this is completely useless to finding patients. So that's, again, an issue we have. We don't have solvent. Again, if I apply this in my outpatient clinic, it will be completely different. But this is, we don't use FIB4 there because we already know they're sick. And this is not just me, crazy studies. This is just a recent study. There are now many, many coming out showing exactly the same. Here they find missed cases ranging between 70 and 40%. So just be aware, not staring blind on something because it's the ground truth, because it's not. Then what we do is then recommend sequential screening. This is another study we did. Okay, I just showed you here to the higher part here. FIB4 here was 63% correctly classified. It's, yeah, something around that range here. You can still see the ratio of false negative versus false positive, not too good. But here it was reduced to reduce the burden of referrals. And then if you apply an ELF as a reflex test, okay, FIB4 above 1.3, automatic ELF test, and then you can improve the correctly classified by 25%. So this is probably the next step forward, but I think not the final thing. It's again in a low level, both among a risk population and basic population. What happened then if we move into the outpatient clinic or the index patients here with a prevalence of 15 to 20%? Another study we did actually before this to see, okay, how does all these biomarkers that were applied or developed in Hep C and INASL be used in alcohol? Nobody at that time was very interested in biomarkers for alcohol. And what we could show, which I think was important news, was that all these biomarkers, ELF, transient elastography, FIB4, APRIS, they performed just as well in alcohol-related liver disease as they performed in any other liver disease. So let's stop that discussion and not say that alcohol is something you cannot study for biomarkers, because there was all this variation and discussion of inflammation in the liver, but that turns out not really to be important. This is a huge biopsy-controlled study. Yet, of course, there are issues. You need to be aware. So the table the figure to the left shows that, of course, you have very high AST corresponding to some kind of inflammation in the liver. Yes, the ROC curve, the diagnostic performance drops. But maybe more illustrative is the figure to the right, where they looked at patients during index and during alcohol withdrawal or alcohol relapses. And as you can see, and that's again, I think, a very important takeaway. So low transient elastographies you can trust. So patients come in, they have a TE of 6, good, you're well. Then they come in and say it's 15, you say, okay, you may have a disease. May. Because what happens if they change, you can see then TE drops. I'll come back to that. And similar also in relapses, just may change. So here comes another, I think, key takeaway. So index liver stiffness, index, that's in the low prevalence profession, around 50% drop below 8 kilopascal on the second assessment. And again, I don't have time to show all the data. We're just working on the liver screen results. That's 30,000 patients, and there are 55% of those with an index high liver stiffness above 8, drop below 8. The other study, a French study in the middle, there was a Swedish screening study, the one to the right, where they actually did it in patients with type 2 diabetes. They only had 45%. So this, I think, has big implications of what is the consequence of an index transient elastography. Let's move to prognosis, the second question of our patient here in early ALD. So what we need to understand, and also we discussed that yesterday, with alcohol just makes the atonic liver disease more aggressive. And here to the left, this is just a biopsy controlling that if, for instance, you have 5 years down the road and if 3 patients, 5% have decompensated if they have MASLD, 20% if they have alcohol-related liver disease. So that also means that we need to be much more over their neck because they progress much faster. And that translates directly into also what does it mean. So now I criticize TE, but actually as a prognostic tool, if you got the diagnosis right, it's also very strong prognostic indicators. So do 2 of them and then follow them. And again, this is, again, benchmarking another study we did, benchmarking liver biopsy with transient elastography, ELF test. Not all have a FibroScan, expensive, it's nice equipment, etc. But according to this, an ELF test, which is a serum-based test, performs just as well in prognosis. And to the right is the time-dependent ROC curve, and that's quite unique. You have biomarkers that actually stays relevant over the years. That's the purpose of a time-dependent ROC curve. And this is just to show more or less the same thing. But this is significant. You know, if you have a patient between 15 and 20 kilopascal, in 3 years, a quarter has decompensated. So if you had and this is very serious basically, so if you have a cancer you knew would pop up with 25% in 3 years, you would take it very seriously. So I think we have right information actually to take decision and advance this field. The third thing is then, yes, we do all these things and then we repeat the biomarkers, but the very, very few studies that look in what does a repeat biomarkers mean? What does a change in biomarker mean? Nobody knows. We do it all the time. I think all times in our patient clinic, we look at these endless lists of nodes and moving a bit up and down, and we think we know what it means. And this is the first study that's done in alcohol-related liver disease. We were fortunate that it wasn't so surprising, a joint venture between our center and Vienna. 2 takeaways here. The one in the middle is actually looking into not the 8 kilopascal cutoff that has been pushed very much, but the 10 kilopascal cutoff. And looking at this large cohort follow-up, and it turns out that we have below 10 kilopascal, and that it's exactly the same in MASLD. The risk of progression is very, very low. So don't tell these people they have a severe liver disease because they don't. At least that's not likely what they're going to kill. But as you can see there, here, if you have above 10, that's definitely a yellow or a red flag. Then to the right, then you can have different things. Okay, is it already low and stays low? Prognosis is good. If it's low and increases, bad news. If it's high and decreases, good news. So that's also a good motivator for the patients. Okay, you changed lifestyle, you did this and that, your TE dropped for this. That means you're on a different risk trajectory. So it's a useful tool for that. But if it's high and accelerates, it's just, you can see then you have in 2 years, 50% are decompensated. That's a very, very dangerous disease. And these are all patients that were compensated at index and having pre-cirrhosis fibrosis. Okay, now I criticized parts of this and told that some of it's also super useful. But the problem is that we need something better. And where do you look? So what a place to look, AJ, when I'm running out of time, you just let me know, because I'm very enthusiastic about this and might go too far. That's the whole universes of omics. You open to a new universe and you see stars, endless list of stars and opportunities. You want to grab them all, and that of course drive you kind of nuts, but also very fascinated. So that's trying to get this, that today it's so easy and cheap to do GWAS. It's very easy and high throughput to do many different types of omics. Particularly love proteomics, but you can do metabolomics, you can do transcriptomics, you can do all kinds of it. You've done all kinds of them. The question then back to Henry. Okay, don't get lost, Alexander, get fascinated, but back to the Henry question. Is this relevant for him, yes or no? You're still a clinician. So to the left of this is the classes of biomarkers. That backs to understanding what is it you want. So this is the FDA classification, the best classification of biomarkers: diagnostic, prognostic, predictive, monitoring, etc. Let's not go into this, but you need to, again, if you want to do something, what is it you're looking for? And without getting lost into technology, but I really urge you to get fascinated by technology, because it easily disrupt what you do and how you do it, because some of these things basically transform, or I will always say revolutionize what we do, because of the depth, the speed, and the granularity of what you get. So today, yes, 10 years ago, single cell sequencing popped up, and we were all fascinated. You could publish a paper with 5 cells or something like that, because you got so many readouts. Today, it's completely different. Now you have thousands of them and hundreds of patients. So that whole thing is coming out. But a new thing we're part of developing, sadly, was not an ALD study, but we applied this technology also in the liver field, and started off with alpha-1 and also went all the way with nature to show that we could use this high resolution. Basically take a paraffin embedded slide, and then you do laser capture, make microdissection. You have a laser that cuts out the nuclei of a cell. And imagine a liver that's super heterogeneous. It makes a big difference if you go for hepatocyte. But also, we heard about the sonulation yesterday. Where do you cut? And if you go for a cell-free material where the fibrosis is, that's the story what we're looking for. And we also know that fibrosis, different place in the liver, is different. So imagine you can get all these things and understand exactly what's happening in terms of transcription and protein generation. That provides interesting stuff. But beyond that, because then you get a wealth of data, I'll get back to that, but the power then of operationalizing that, bringing it together based on, so this is beyond any statistics any lethal person could do. This is bioinformatics at a different level. And then there's the throughput. So today you can do, and I think in whatever, 5 to 10 years, these machines will be in our clinics, because now they can do hundreds of patients during the day. And that will only be faster, more accurate, and more quantitative. That has been some of the issues with mass spec-based technology. But let's see. Okay, fascinated. Reality check is always any signal, anything that's relevant for Henry. So this is just one of our studies in the first studies in liver, doing plasma proteomics, or actually both liver and plasma. So we had a large group of patients. We dove with proteomics in the liver tissue and in the plasma. We had, at that time, today you say, wow, that's nothing. We own 5,000 proteins in the liver and whatever, 500-600 in the plasma. Still a lot at that time. Wow. Because if you know how many blood tests do we use, not much. So we just go straight to the heat map here. You can always see the volcano here. There's a lot of signals. But let's go to the heat map. This one is the liver. This is the plasma. Okay, red, that means there's a strong association. So with tons and tons of features, hundreds of different features that sort of correlated with severity of disease. And that was linked to inflammation, immune system, extracellular matrix, etc. So there was a lot to fish in. So fast forward, because going into, let's just go back to the biomarkers. Okay, can this thing perform, yes or no? So this is just a ROC curve, so be skeptical. I'll come back to the clear benchmark. And the bottom line here was very easy. to ask these machines here to, in a test and validation, could you beat whatever we have? We could do that easily both with F2 fibrosis, traditionally it'd be difficult to find, inflammation and steatosis. Not that people care that much about this today, but fibrosis, we could definitely beat anything. With a ROC curve above 90, that's pretty impressive for some proteins we haven't seen before. Okay, then the test is to benchmark it again. Here is the benchmark again, everything we have in the clinic, translator elastography, shear wave, elastography, FIB4, you name it. Put it all in there. And again, we could see that the proteomics based on a number of proteins ranging from 2 to 9 could basically be on par or beat them all. And again, if it's relative to have a machine that may cost you whatever, $100,000 or $200,000 or euros, it could be attractive to have a serum-based test, and again disrupt that, because suddenly these machines will be very cheap and you can have them also in the healthcare system with less resources by targeting proteomics. And then the next thing is, of course, Henry's sex question. This is bad, and that's again, we looked into liver-related mortality and all-cause mortality, and again, these models could actually beat all we have, both at 3 years and as 5 years. It again seems to be a stable signal with clinical relevance. Another thing we looked into, which I think is very, very interesting, we know that all the genes Naga told about yesterday, they regulate lipid metabolism. We think it's a fibrosis disease, but why are the genes that are associated with this disease in clinical relevance lipid genes? So we did this lipidomic study, and what was interesting, we saw that a number of lipid classes, we think it's steatotic liver disease, we buy that, but the point here is that the lipids disappears. We'll talk along about that, but ceramides, discretes, phosphosylines, cholines, and sphingomyelines decreased as the disease progressed. So we just, to the left is liver metabolomics, to the right is plasma lipidomics. We just take the top bar here, that's in fibrosis. And look, there's not a single red. Red is then the heat map for positive correlation. So in all the fibrosis stages 1 through 4, the lipids disappears or decreases. Interesting. And here again, both in the liver and plasma was associated with survival of the patient. And we also did Mendelian randomization to validate the findings. So this is causally linked, I think, an interesting signal, and also the potential for biomarker. And we got drugs that work around the lipid metabolism. These might be interesting to revisit. Okay, but now I just said one thing, a bit of lipids and a bit of proteins. But what about the dream world? If you know everything about everything, can you then do it? And that's what the multi-omics. Okay, I'd say you can have triply, you can do it, you can have genetics, you can have proteins, you can have transcripts, you can have the regulators, you can have whatever. And that we try to do in the Galaxy consortium here, a cohort of 462 patients with alcohol-related liver disease, with biopsies, with follow-up. Just fast forward, we had 18 different layers of omics, almost any omics you could come up with in stool, plasma, urine, and the liver. And then the reference was liver biopsy and outcomes. So liver biopsy, let's just focus on fibrosis, and outcomes, decompensation and death. And this is how it looks, so a really relevant clinical spectrum. Yeah, still not out, so these papers need a lot of polishing to get out, but hopefully not too far future. And you cannot see the detail here, but it's again, let's just focus on the one to the right, that's fibrosis. You can see there's a ton of signals. We had 3,000 omics features that were somehow related to relevant events in the liver disease. So okay, you almost cannot see the forest here for all the trees, and that's the problem with this. You drown in the data, you drown in the signals, yet you know there might be very interesting hidden signals and truths out there that you can learn from. So it'll probably take a while to get this. If you just drill it down to the biomarker question, not the mechanistic connection, how to connect all these dots and understand how the metabolism goes together. But here, let's focus on just fibrosis here, 3 fibrosis here. These are all the clinical parameters for anything from MELD score, Child-Pugh score, PRO-C3, whatever. And on the other side here, you have all these 18 layers of omics. And as you can see, many of them perform well. Here again, the proteomics in the lead. And down here is the multi-omics. Another one I want to point your attention to is cytokines. Inflammation signaling features have a very strong diagnostic performance in this. And when we performed multi-omics, it was actually difficult to beat. The problem is if you already have ROC curve around 90, getting beyond that when you have an imperfect standard is a reference standards as liver biopsy, but also read out clinical outcomes. So that holds some information, but also honestly a little bit disappointing. We hope to find a big strong signal from microbiome, but that was actually very weak. What I want to tell you here is how do we benchmark biomarkers? Because now you can see all these things that all look good. There's a lot of ROC curves, nobody understands them. So what we implemented and invented, let's see if it flies. Now, we didn't invent this. Let's just go to advanced fibrosis here. You can see there's a lot of signals. There's some of the standard here. There's something called net reclassification improvement. I would expect that going forward, we'll see this more and more in biomarker studies. Because how do you benchmark biomarkers? We got all these things and the curves go here and there. What does it mean? So how much better is this than the current best standard? That's the net reclassification improvement. And again, here to be truth, how many in advanced fibrosis? Not so many popped up. In mild fibrosis, yes, suddenly you got something here with a cytokine that is 18% better than what we have. Okay, where do you position these biomarkers? Another metric we invented is the number needed to predict. It's again to see how many tests do you need to take to pick one, just like we need from number needed to treat and number needed to harm. It's another way of ranking these. And then you can put it all together. Now I bring you all the way back to my first complicated slide to see how do you understand biomarker. And this is another, I think, useful way of presenting biomarker. You got on the x-axis the prevalence of disease, because then you know the biomarker sensitivity to prevalence. And as you can see, these biomarkers, because it's the best of the best you can get with the strongest technology you have, they perform pretty well as long as the prevalence is higher. But as soon as you go lower, the prevalence, it changes. And these also had prognostic abilities. Let me not dug into, how much time do I have? 2 minutes? Okay. And this also translated into similar way of see how does this explain and can we use for decompensation. So I just have 3 slides left. So the whole thing is then how do we bring all these thousands and thousands of papers to the patients? You know, I just a simple PubMed search, 68,000 on biomarkers, 4,000 last year's. How many do we have in clinical practice? Yeah, during the last 20 years, we have had ELF tests with a CE marking or FDA approval and FibroScan. And then recently we have had in Europe LiverPro with a CE marking and ProC3. So there's a waste difference between that. And what is the reason for that? I don't know, but this is definitely one of the reasons. We have very, very clear tracks for how to develop a drug. We have massive, super rich companies that earns a ton of money when they got a drug out. But the biomarker industry is completely different. They have very little willingness to invest and go through these very difficult qualification steps actually to get into the market. So I don't think we need to work and try to convince some of these companies to move forward with some of these qualifying biomarkers. And it could probably help us when we get drugs into both the MASLD or the whole steatotic liver disease field, because many of these will be also, I think, relevant across the spectrum of steatotic liver disease. So just to sum up here, diagnosis, I think we got that. But remember, in low prevalence populations, FIB4 has 50% false negative. Liver stiffness has 50% false positive. So repeat them. Prognosis seems good. Monitoring promising. Omics, the future, maybe, maybe not. Treatment effects, we don't know yet, but that would be wonderful. But I think a key barrier is the regulatory and the transition from research, academia, into commercialization of the biomarkers. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Craig, for taking us through your journey with the biomarkers in alcohol-related liver disease from clinics to omics. It's customary not to have any questions or comments after the oration. So we'll request you to please come in the center of the stage for the felicitation ceremony.
I request Dr. R.K. Dhiman, President INASL, and Dr. Ajay Duseja, Secretary General INASL and Organizing Chairperson for INASL 2025, to please felicitate Dr. Alexander Gregg for his immense contribution. Congratulations. We are truly honored to have you here. Yes, we put it in a bag.
Since we also have the family of Dr. D.V. Datta, Deepak, Meenakshi, and their daughter, you can also come on the stage for a photograph with the orator. Thank you.